Because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are, for the third time, God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. So render therefore to all of their due, taxes, whom taxes are due, custom, to whom custom is due, fear, to whom fear, and honor, to whom honor. Now, no one enjoys paying taxes, I suspect. I also don't like falling into a pothole. I don't mind that the road doesn't collapse under me when I'm going over a bridge. I mean, there are certain things that we would equate benefit to. The Lord's definition of taxes is you should pay your taxes because they are used to pay God's minister, who continually attends himself to the very thing of punishing evil and rewarding good. God's ministers 3 times, and they want to do their God-given job, which is described in verses 1 through 5. Now look, I know we scream about taxes and how high they are and who do they really benefit and how are they spent. Let me just give you some peace. Here's your job, just pay them. God's money anyway, isn't it? I'm pretty sure everything you own belongs to him. So, unless you're upset for God's sake, and by the way, he has cattle on 1,000 hills. He's richer than Steve Jobs and Oprah combined. It'll be just fine, you know? Pay them, and then the users of them will answer to God. If you think that taxes are bad today, know this. Every society that has lasted more than 50 years has historical evidence of tremendous abuse in taxation. Misuse, restrictive, exorbitant. And if there is one government that was horrendous, it was the Romans. I mean, the Roman government may have been the worst at all. They levied taxes that were just to give Caesar spending money on the weekend. By the end of the Roman Empire, which collapsed from within due to corruption, Rome was one of the largest welfare states where literally 1 out of every 1,000 people worked and everyone else was a slave. So, yeah, we're all right. Israel was certainly familiar with oppressive and unjust taxation. When Nehemiah was rebuilding Jerusalem, the people came to him and complained how the Persians had so taxed them that they had to sell their home, they had to take loans, and even sell their children into slavery because they couldn't survive. That's a pretty heavy-duty taxation, isn't it? And then the Lord says, what? Just submit to those over you. And Nehemiah went and spoke to them. In the days of Solomon and his son, the taxes were so bad that it led to a split in the country. The first time you read about taxes in the Bible, by the way, is when Joseph was in Egypt, and he was told by the Lord of a famine that was coming through vision and all, and that the Pharaoh had received. 7 years of famine, Genesis 41, and he began to gather taxes just to prepare for the 7 years of good, or during the 7 years of good, before the 7 years of famine comes, so that he could take care of people. Later on, in Genesis 47, they made the taxes permanent because another famine was coming. When God established taxation in Israel, there was a tithe, or a tenth of a 10% tithe devoted entirely to the care of the priests in Leviticus chapter 27. And it was done because the priests were to serve the people in spiritual things, but the priests had no land of their own. They had no place to grow crops of their own. They were dependent upon the nation whom they served in this theocratic government. But that's not the only tax you find in the Old Testament. God added a festival tax in Deuteronomy 12, which was just used to pay for sacrifices and the tabernacle, later on for the temple. It was that tax that Malachi 3 talked about people holding back so that they were robbing God. There was a third tax that was also a tithe that was collected every third year. That was supposed to support the aliens and the orphans and the widows, according to Deuteronomy 14. So that was 3.3% a year per individual. So a tax for government expense, one for cultivating national life, one for welfare services, another one, a final tax that was a half shekel for every male over 20 to support the temple. In any event, if you put all the taxes that the Jews faced under God's economy, taxation was at 24% in the Bible.